That Podcast Thing presents Home Movie Club, originally recorded January 2018. Episode number 20, I Know.
Hello and welcome to Home Movie Club, the podcast in which we take an irreverent and sometimes irrelevant look at the top grossing movies of the last 80 odd years. This time around we are watching 1980's Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back, the second film in what has become possibly one of the biggest blockbuster franchises ever seen.
Yay!
As always, I am delighted to say that I am joined by Joe Carter.
Hello.
Daisy Swaffer.
Hello!
And as always, my glorious wife, Sammy Kelch.
Lovely to be here, it is.
This is the highest grossing movie from the year I was born. Yay!
Yay!
I was 13. Right, so let's get some initial thoughts from everybody and see what everybody thought about this film. Let's move it up a bit and start with Daisy.
I'm a Star Wars fan, and this is my favourite Star Wars movie. So, yeah. Very happy to be covering this one for the podcast. And it's great. I love it. Also, it has an enormous amount of trivia.
Yes, there may be quite a few fun facts coming this way.
Yay!
Joe, your thoughts on this film?
Well, I like trivia. I'm not a big Star Wars fan. This was clearly a middle film. It felt like a middle film, and there was literally one woman in the entire film. So, yeah.
And Sammy?
This is not my favorite Star Wars film because I refuse to choose a favorite Star Wars film, but I love Star Wars, and this is a good Star Wars, and it's got many things about it that I love that I'm sure we'll talk about later in greater detail. It's good!
Well, it's no Star Wars Holiday Special. For that, we should probably be thankful.
Is that your opening thought? It's no Star Wars Holiday Special.
No, my opening thought... I haven't seen the Star Wars Holiday Special.
Nor have I, nor do I intend
to watch it.
I don't ever want to have my Star Wars experience tainted by seeing it.
No, definitely not. Yeah, so my opening thoughts. I like this film, obviously. I remember going and queuing around the block to watch it when it first came out. I was just a wee boy. But yeah, no, I've always loved this film. It is seen by many as the best of the Star Warses, even taking into account the new trilogy that is currently being shown.
I have a question for you, Dave.
Yes, of course.
As you are the only one amongst us who is old enough to remember going to see this at the cinema, then when I was doing my trivia troll for this episode, I saw that the novelization of the movie was out about a month before the film was actually released at the cinema, and it made no bones about trying to hide the fact that of the twist at the end. So the twist was out there for about a month beforehand. Was that something that you knew about? Were people talking about it generally?
Well, this obviously was long before the internet, and also I have to point out I was 7, so...
But at school, maybe, were people
I don't remember that being an issue. I don't actually remember... I have read the book, and I can tell you exactly what the first line of the book is, but I think I read that after watching the film.
Is it a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away?
No, it is... Now, this is what I call cold, because Luke Skywalker is monologuing to himself on his... Tauntaun.
That is a great opening line.
That said, I did read the Return of the Jedi novelization before seeing Return of the Jedi.
No.
So the bit at the end where Vader dies, spoilers for a film that's several hundred years old, it's fine, whatever.
Several hundred.
And again, this podcast is about films, it's going to be spoilery.
Yeah.
Yes, the fact that Darth Vader died at the end of Return of the Jedi was spoiled by the book before I saw the film.
Yeah.
Oh,
So yeah, there was not at that point anywhere near the scrutiny on the films. Again, no internet, but equally there was none of the security we get now where, I mean, you don't know what's going to happen in a film before you pretty much watch it, whereas then we had the entire novelization available long before the film came out.
Yeah, I was really surprised when I read that in the trivia, so I was curious to know if it had been kind of widely read enough that people knew going into the movie about the twist, or if they were going in blind.
Quite possibly for the older viewers. I mean, I'd say I was 7, so I wasn't really reading necessarily heavily at that point anyway.
Well, I mean, in my opinion, a good piece of media holds up whether you know what's going to happen or not. It shouldn't rely on the surprise of a spoiler or a twist. I mean, some of my favourite films are ones where it's been like a really cool spoiler or twist, but then I will rewatch or reread or re-listen with rapt attention because they hold up, you know.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the case with this one as well, because yes, it is a big reveal. I've watched this film multiple times, and the fact that I know what's coming in no way, shape or form ruins it for me. So.
It was kept very heavily under wraps with regards to the film, which is why I was surprised it was out in the novelisation, because they had David Prowse, who physically played Darth Vader, actually say a different line at the time, and only 5 people in the making of the movie knew about that twist, what it was. So yeah, I
mean, I don't know whether the book came out before it came out in America, because I suspect it's one of those where it came out in America a while before it came out over here.
Yeah.
And again, no internet, so, you know, apart from having your Uncle John who was in America and saw it, you're probably not going to know much about it. So let's get into the story itself, as we've already spoiled the big ending. Actually, we haven't actually said what the big spoiler is now. So the film, as all classic Star Wars films, opens up on a black starscape that pans then down to an Imperial Star Destroyer.
I have a fun fact already. So you know how this movie, like the previous one, opens up with the dramatic music and the text scroll thing, and we don't have the credits. This is something we've talked about in some others of our podcasts, about how movies used to have all the credits at the beginning of the film.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so this is carrying on from that. George Lucas didn't want to have the credits at the beginning of the film. He felt like that wasn't going straight into the action. He was absolutely right, in my opinion. Yeah. So the Writers and Directors Guild had allowed him to move the credits to the end for Star Wars, the first film, because they didn't think the film was going to be very successful. He wanted to... they wanted to try to enforce that this time, though, because he was still a member of the Writers Guild and Directors Guild. And so he insisted that he have them at the end. And so they tried to pull Empire from release. Yep.
This is ridiculous.
They were not successful in that.
Petty.
So they fined Lucas about $250,000. They tried to find the director, Irving Kershner, as well, but Lucas paid all of the fines. And so George Lucas resigned from the Writers Guild and Directors Guild.
Good Lord.
Yeah. But that it had an impact on the future films, the fact that he wasn't a member in terms of his hiring choices for the later films. So, you know, it was a big decision of his to resign from the guilds, and I think there's still an ongoing grudge between them as a result. But I mean, he was absolutely right in his decision in terms of how the movie flows for this opening thing, and especially with the first one, with them having let him do it with the first one to then say, no, you can't with the second because the first was successful.
Well, I mean, he went on, like, those three, the whole trilogy, the whole original trilogy were all the top grossing movies. So, I mean, clearly he didn't suffer because of it. But it was good for him for standing up for his principles and not... And sort of sacrificing for his art.
Yeah, he had his vision and he wasn't going to compromise on it. And it was a big risk for, you know, a young director doing these things that hadn't really been done before. This film was, riding on the coattails of a very successful film, but we've seen a lot of films where a sequel has been a flop and a big old waste of money. Oh my
God, so many films.
And this film was an extremely expensive film to make that went massively over budget. It was a big risk, so he was really risking his career with it.
Thankfully, it turned out all right in the end.
Yeah.
Just a little bit,
yeah.
And then we ended up with Jar Jar, so
as you know, like a highly anticipated sophomore effort, it is a good one.
So yes, we start with a Star Destroyer going through an inky black starscape. It pans down,
Inky
and
black, I like
dozens of little sort of probes are dispatched from its underside. We follow one down as it falls towards a snowy white planet, impacting heavily onto the surface before a spider-like spy droid rises up from the crater and hovers away.
We're told in the opening scroll that thousands of remote probes are being sent into the reaches of space. There's a lot of planets and a lot of surface on each planet. Thousands doesn't sound like very good coverage.
No, but they know roughly where they're going to be
they must have like
within a region of
a
space.
guesstimate of what bits of space. It's not,
Into the reaches of space is perhaps a bit misleading.
Hyperbolic.
It's poetic license.
And this film, as with all Star Wars films, geography and just things like that don't really count for much. The physics and geography of Star Wars have always been very woolly and loose to interpretation. So
Yeah.
At a point we'll get to shortly, well, further into the film, is one of those. But yes, so we get a first shot of our hero, Luke Skywalker.
He grew up on a desert planet, so he's got to be pretty cold here.
Yeah,
I think anyone would
not
be pretty
necessarily
cold here.
acclimatised.
It's like lots of snow.
It's real snow as well.
Yay.
They
Yeah.
filmed in Norway. They shipped massive crates of fake snow up there in case there wasn't real snow, but there was a lot of real snow.
There's
awesome.
plenty of snow in Norway. It's like the land of Christmas.
In a place called Finse that I looked up how to pronounce.
Nice.
So yes, we see Luke Skywalker on the back of a bipedal animal, sort of a two-legged horse almost. He sees the meteor, in inverted commas, hitting the ground as well, near his location. He gets on the communicator and speaks to Han Solo, the other hero of the piece that is, white and male. And,
Yay, Hans.
and not yet dead.
Sweetheart.
He reports to Han Solo that he plans to investigate the fallen object, but before he can move off, he is knocked unconscious by an indigenous predator, the Wampa.
So there's a lot of debate as to the insertion of this particular attack into the screenplay. It wasn't in like the early versions of the screenplay, and so there's a lot of debate as to whether or not it was added because of Mark Hamill's quite serious car crash in 1977, and he had to have a fair bit of plastic surgery on his face, and
I remember that.
a lot of people think that this was put in order to explain Luke Skywalker's facial markings as a result, but you can barely see anything at all different about his face. So
I didn't know until I heard about it many years later.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it
There's
just
a
looks normal
lot
to
of
me.
people who don't think that it was inserted because of that, and even people who worked on the film. There's very varying accounts as to whether it was or wasn't inserted for that reason. So up for debate.
So yes, he's knocked off his tauntaun and his lifeless body is dragged away through the snow. We switch back to the icy rebel base where Han Solo reports and announces his intention to leave the rebels because he has to go and pay off the debt he owes to Jabba the Hutt. At this point, we had yet to see Jabba the Hutt because obviously the special editions hadn't happened yet. So no one knew who Jabba the Hutt was at this point. He was just a unknown figure. And yes, we should point out, as we did with the original Star Wars, we watched a few episodes back, that this is the original cut of Star Wars Empire Strikes Back and not the redone and refiddled with, and in some ways some people would say ruined versions that were released for DVDs and Blu-rays later.
I wouldn't go as far as ruined personally, but I would say a lot of these.
I agree. And actually,
feel
to be
really
fair,
unnecessary.
with Empire, Empire suffered the least when it came to the changes made, and the changes that were made were to an extent understandable and actually didn't affect it in any negative way.
What did they change in this one?
We'll point it out when we get to it, but it was a lot of the changes were just little things, like when they were running around Cloud City, they put windows and extra things so you could see out into the city. Because the original cut, it was just like Doctor Who-ish white corridors that were running around. So they wanted to add a bit more to it to give it a bit more light and sort of shade.
Fair enough.
And they also changed the bit with the Emperor, but I'll come to that in a bit.
That's in my fun facts.
Yeah. Princess Leia argues with Han that he's a vital asset to the rebellion, although Han counters that actually it's a little more personal than that.
He's really arrogant and unattractive here, I have to say.
Yeah. Yeah, no, at this point, I mean, and I don't know whether it was sort of retconned around but there's lots of stuff that kind of expands the media that kind of gives them a bit more of a meaningful relationship. But if you just look at this film as, and indeed as it was at the time, just a second Star Wars film and there was very little else around for it, yeah, he doesn't look good coming out of this.
Fun fact, I believe this is one of the instances where Carrie Fisher had to stand on a box because she's a clear foot shorter than Harrison Ford, so to get both of them in the shot at the same time, quite often they had her stood on a box.
She's small.
That is funny, because she's adorable.
Yeah. She's 5'1", he's 6'1", so yeah.
Han goes back to the hangar bay and complains to Chewbacca that he's trying to leave, but the Wookiee is still mid-repairs. The droids C-3PO and R2-D2, in their sort of lighter comedy element, bicker about melting the ice around the princess's wardrobe and getting all her clothes wet. But they go to Han and say that Leia's trying to contact them because Luke has not returned from his patrol. Obviously, this is worrying. Han checks with the deck officer who confirms that Luke has not yet checked in.
Well, he wasn't sure, and then he gets reamed for it.
He's a lot more likeable at this point, Han, when he's not aggressively trying to come on to someone who's saying no, and he's concerned about his friend being missing. He's suddenly a much more likeable character.
Obviously, the problem being that the temperature outside is dropping rapidly, and so he delays his departure and leaves the base searching for Luke on a Tauntaun because they say that the speeders, which we will see shortly, are not yet accustomed to the cold.
Are you saying that he goes on this rescue mission solo?
Oh my
No,
God.
other people go, but they all go in different areas.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, just to ruin your
Daisy.
joke there, sir.
But they do warn him about the Tauntaun, saying that it will kill it.
Yes.
So
Yeah. But he's happy to risk his life and indeed that of a pack animal to
bring back the only Jedi they
rescue
know.
his friend. Yeah. Meanwhile, we see Luke hanging upside down inside the Wampa's lair.
He's alive!
Yeah,
Sorry, because
he's
at that
alive,
point we
but he's
didn't
hanging
know he was
upside down,
alive, so that's...
feet frozen into the ceiling. I have no idea how the Wampa melted the ice and then refroze it around his feet. Best not to ask that question.
I believe it's implied in other media surrounding the film that the Wampas do have some kind of supernatural abilities. So, yeah, I read that in my trivia troll.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that one. That seems like someone trying to make excuses for flaws in the plots. But... so, yeah, Luke realises he's trapped upside down. He looks around and sees his lightsaber but can't quite reach it. So we see his first sort of stumbling is into the world of the Jedi and the first use of the Force. There is probably other points of him using it, but this is the first time we implicitly see it in this film. So he reaches out with his mind and the lightsaber leaps into his hand. He ignites it and uses it to melt the ceiling as he crumples down into the floor.
I have a fun fact.
Do go on.
This is just, I'm just going to be saying this a lot during this recording. At any point during this film where you see a lightsaber leaping into Luke Skywalker's hand, it was done so Mark Hamill was throwing away the lightsaber and then they've just rolled the film backwards.
Yeah, it's the easiest way.
Yeah.
of doing it.
Yeah, definitely.
So it is leaping into his hand because he has thrown it from his hand. It's beautiful.
wasn't there something about lightsaber being like a particular type of... actually being a particular type of light bulb or something or other? Was
It's
that
a Kyber crystal.
Kyber?
No, in the in the actual original production, it was, and I don't think it was the case with Empire, but in Star Wars they made it out of a flashlight, so a flash bulb holder rather for a camera.
Yes, because we discussed it in Rear Window, didn't we? Yes.
Yeah.
I remembered it. I couldn't remember where.
Yeah.
I know that one of you had said it, because obviously you like Star Wars.
For Star
Probably
Wars,
my
it was the
husband.
prop was made. The same thing was used in Rear Window, but actually for this movie they just machined them out of metal
Fair enough.
and probably rubber, so they threw at each other without damaging themselves.
Good.
So at this point, Luke gets hold of the lightsaber and just kind of slices his feet out of the ice. But I'm just like, how is he managing to do that without chopping his feet off or slicing some toes off or something?
Yeah.
Like,
The
he just
Force-
seems to do it quite
the Force
casually,
finds a
just
way.
a quick
Quite
prick
casually
and
slashing at his feet
Yeah.
and not losing his feet.
getting himself free very quickly and easily without damaging himself in any way at the same time. Some kind of Jedi sense of his own
Indeed.
body, I don't know.
The Wampa lurches at him, but he hacks at it and then escapes outside of the cave.
Poor thing.
And this is one of the changes in the re-releases. They actually added more of the Wampa in it, and they added another puppet and added extra bits in.
Yeah, I didn't like
so
that
you
change.
saw more of it.
I preferred not seeing very much of the Wampa because then it's scarier in my head than it actually appears on screen.
You could say that the Wampa was now armless.
Well, you could,
Poor
but
thing.
then you would be tutted at.
The poor thing. Like, how is it gonna, live very well now? It's got one arm missing.
He's got an arm off.
Yeah. And
I
it's not
suspect
just a
it
flesh
probably
wound.
died. But it doesn't matter, because we never see it again, so... So Luke manages to free himself, go outside, but is soon overcome by the cold. In a state of delirium, Luke sees an apparition of his late mentor, Jedi Master Obi-Wan Kenobi, played again by Alec Guinness, who instructs him to receive training from the Jedi Master Yoda on the planet Dagobah.
Yay.
Well, he says the Dagobah system. He doesn't actually specify this particular planet.
No, and again, it's like there's probably 8 or so planets in this system,
Yeah.
but...
You'd think he might give him a bit more specific, the planet such and such in the Dagobah system might be better than just the Dagobah system. Oh, okay, I'll just head to an entire solar system and assume I'll
Well,
find...
that might be the only. It might be the only inhabitable world anyway. But no, again, as I said earlier, geography and physics and that in the Star Wars universe don't hold up for any reasonable scrutiny. Han finds Luke, but as he rushes to his friend, his Tauntaun finally succumbs to the cold and expires.
I have some fun facts.
Yeah.
Hi. Fun facts, 2 of them. So, where Han is coming to rescue him now, that was originally meant to be filmed at Elstree Studios. So Luke was the only one who was actually meant to be filming up in Finse in Norway, but they got snowed in. So they got Harrison Ford up there. He couldn't get up there by normal train either. He had to go in the engine compartment of a snow clearance vehicle to film up there, and that meant that his costume was only designed for studio work, not for actual outside in the real genuine snow.
Oh, no.
Oops. Yeah, he was not very well insulated.
Oh.
And
That's
in
not very
in
nice.
terms of the my second fact about the slicing open of the Tauntaun, that was an American Indian trick, so that's where they got the inspiration for doing that from, and you can see that dramatized in The Revenant, the 2015 film starring Leonardo DiCaprio.
So Han sets to building a shelter, but as we say, he uses rather inexpertly Luke's lightsaber to cut open the belly of the Tauntaun and shoves Luke in there. Or it's implied that he shoves Luke in there. Obviously, we don't see any of that. It's sort of shot from the other side.
And he thought they smelt bad on the outside.
So gross.
So he keeps it warm until he can build the shelter. It's the morning, and they're both rescued by a rebel patrol using ground speeders that they've obviously now got working for plot reasons.
That's nice.
Luke is taken to the medical bay and placed in a Bacta tank to heal.
Oh, Bacta,
wearing
is that what it's
a
called?
napkin.
The diaper tank, yeah.
In my notes, I called it the water tank revivatron.
No, it is a Bacta
Oh,
tank.
I wish they'd call it a water tank revivatron. I love that.
What does Bacta stand for anything? Because I'm thinking that's not as good a name as water tank revivatron.
No, Bacta is the gel they use. It's
Oh,
a
okay.
medical gel.
Bacta tank revivatron, then.
Yeah, that'll do. Bacta tank revivatron.
Excellent.
To heal the wounds received from the Wampa and I guess from the freezing cold as well. We see him in the tank and then he's released. It says the diaper tank, as it's called in some things, because, yeah.
Yep. Diaper tank.
So he's released and put into recovery, where he's met up by Leia, Han, and Chewbacca.
They exchanged some good Star Wars universe insults in the recovery room, which I appreciated. I always feel like a world is enriched in world building state when you hear, some of the world specific insults.
Yep. So Han reminds Luke that that's the second time he's saved him from death. First time being the Death Star at the end of the last episode. Han also tells Luke that he's sticking around for a while longer after the command decreed that no ship should be allowed to leave until the base's energy shield is fully operational. I assume just in case a departing ship gives the base's location away to the enemy spies. However, Han, in his questionable morals at this point, claims this was done by Leia to stop him from leaving. But Leia refutes his claim, telling him he doesn't know anything about women, and then going and kissing Luke. Yeah. Which is, in retrospect...
Knowing what we know now, that's wrong.
If I was watching, for the first time watching this, I would totally have been shipping Luke and Leia, so...
Yeah, to be fair, characters, the viewers, and probably the writers at this point.
Do you have any idea, if Tumblr had existed when this movie came out, can you imagine just the shock and the ire and the horror of, legions of... Leia Luke shippers being like, no! And then people being like, well, technically it's an incest if...
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say at this point, the viewers, the writers probably at this point, certainly the characters didn't know that they were related.
Yeah, spoilers for Return of the Jedi. They're actually brother and sister. So, ew.
It is when you watch it again with that knowledge, it's like,
But in the context of the characters so far and what they know and what we know, then I'm totally on board with that ship, except for the future knowledge I have. Ew.
I know. Is there a scene at some point, sort of between what's actually filmed, I imagine, where each of them are just and just scraping their tongues, being like, I can't believe I kissed that guy and he was my brother.
I would have been reading Splinter of the Mind's Eye and been totally happy with that world until Return of the Jedi came out. So yeah, it's a beautiful moment at this point in the movie history.
All incest, relationship, whatever, shipping aside, I thought this was actually quite a good bit, because it's she was finally able to sort of stand up for herself almost and go, look, seriously, Solo, back off, dude, not interested.
Yeah, this is how much I'm not into you. Look, I'm going to kiss someone else in front of you to show you how much I'm not into you. Yeah,
exactly.
The command staff are called to the Operations Center when ground scans detect an object outside the base's perimeter. Scans show it as metal, so therefore it's not one of the creatures that attacked Luke. Although, up until this point, they've not been able to detect the creatures that attacked Luke, so they're unaware of them either. And I think there are deleted scenes showing more of the Wampers and the Rebels interaction.
Yeah, the Wampers were meant to be in the base as well, which was meant to cause Vader problems when, spoiler, he is in the base later on.
Han and Chewie go off and investigate and find the Imperial probe-droid, which was the floating spider thing that we saw at the first scene of the movie. That then transmits the location of the Rebel base to the Imperial fleet before is firing on Chewie.
Oh, heck.
Han shoots back, because this time Han didn't shoot first. Hits the droid with the low energy blast, but the droid itself activates the self-destruct function and explodes.
Oh, noise.
We then get the first rendition of the Imperial March.
Yay! I was so happy when that music just kicks in and it's like, yes! This was the latest that Vader appeared in any of this trilogy as well. He was there in the first 5 minutes with the first and third films. So.
And obviously what we get is a shot of 2 or 3 Star Destroyers, which at this point have been the largest starships we've seen in this trilogy. And they are suddenly sort of, a shadow goes over them and they are just absolutely swamped by this sort of super Star Destroyer, the Executioner.
It's a great name, isn't it?
It's subtle, isn't it?
No messing around.
It pulls no punches with regard to its sort of purpose.
Yeah, it's not really diplomatic, is it? It's not light and fluffy. This is the Executioner. It has one job. So we're on the bridge of the Executioner, and the droid's transmission is picked up by Captain Piet. But his supervisor, Fleet Admiral Ozzel, dismisses the message as just smugglers or pirates.
So you know how it's like, oh, well, aren't all of these high-ranking Empire people awfully British, what? Whilst our heroic rebels are awfully American, y'all. That was deliberate.
Of course.
And a choice by Irving Kershner, the director of the movie, because he was wanting to make it reflect the American Revolution. Mm-hmm. Most of the actors are for the rebels, for the rebel personnel on Hoth were actually British actors, though, because they were filming it in Britain. So
yes.
Oddly enough,
so they actually added quite a few American voices in post production to simulate it better.
oh my god.
Yeah. So this was America standing up against the British in space a long time ago, very far away.
Sure.
So Vader sees the transmission and realises that this is actually the rebel base and orders the fleet to go to the Hoth system.
When Vader is like, that's the one we have to go to, the actual the official people he's talking to there, they're very like, there's like loads of reports like this, so really, this one? And Vader's just like, yes, that one. And I don't understand how people can still be like doubtful of his mystical powers even by this point. They're just like, really? Oh god, I guess we've got to do what he says, but I mean, seriously.
You'd think they'd be more scared of dying.
Yeah.
Well, yes, partly. I guess part of the problem is that he doesn't really fit into the military hierarchy of the Empire.
Yeah.
He's sort of the Emperor's attack dog, but he's not actually in any way, shape or form part of the Empire's military structure. So it's almost like the boss's son coming in and telling you what to do. If you're sort of working in a company, it can, even though this guy can quite easily kill you with a thought, he's still a bit annoying.
Yeah, it's like, where did this guy even go to Imperial School? I have a master's degree in like evil doing.
So yes, the rebels are now aware that the Empire may know of their location, so they begin to evacuate their base. Han and Chewie try and get the repairs to the Falcon completed before an emotional goodbye to Luke.
It's quite touching in what they're not saying to each other, I felt.
Yeah. The rebel sends to detect the fleet of Star Destroyers entering the system.
A fleet of Star Destroyers. Can we just take a moment to go, a fleet of Star Destroyers? Like, we haven't got a Death Star in this movie. Who needs one? There is a fleet of Star Destroyers beaming in.
I don't know what a fleet consists of, but we see at least 5 or 6 plus the Super Star Destroyers.
It's terrifying.
It's a reasonable amount of firepower, certainly.
That is serious firepower.
However, it's fairly impotent firepower because of their energy shield. So the rebels' energy shield will stop any bombardment, so they sort of activate the shield and push forward with their evacuation plans. Vader is informed by his infantry commander, General Veers, that the rebels have set up an infantry trench and that they have a powerful energy shield protecting them from the Empire's orbital bombardment. Vader orders Veers to launch a surface attack. Vader is somewhat miffed at Admiral Ozzel for clumsily giving away the element of surprise by bringing his ships out of lightspeed too close to the planet.
Somewhat miffed is a slight understatement, I think.
Yes.
He's quite mad at him.
He communicates this displeasure to Captain Piet as he promotes him to Admiral when Ozzel is given Vader's own fatal brand of reprimand.
He force chokes him over a video link. Like, that, I think, is a really terrifying show of force. That's not in the same room. Force choking in the same room is scary enough. This is via a video link.
Obviously, the rebels begin their evacuation. They have a ground-based cannon that fires at any Imperial ship in the way of the fleet, so they can do a little bit of damage on that way. On the surface, the Imperial forces land their ground assault troops, a cohort of 5 four-legged AT-AT walkers.
Yay!
And I'm calling them AT-ATs, even though there is controversy on that.
I believe it has been officially put out by a spokesperson for George Lucas that it is pronounced AT-AT.
Yay!
Yeah, it's said in both ways, and I think the bottom line is it really doesn't matter.
I always
AT-AT.
call them AT&Ts, so, you know.
Yeah, and also they're called AT-ATs in Rogue One, even though they're not actually AT-ATs in that. But,
Yeah.
you know. So yes, they have 5 four-legged AT-AT walkers alongside a few of the smaller two-legged scout walkers. So they land their troops beyond the energy shield and advance from the north onto the rebels' base. In defence, Luke leads his rogue squadron, which at this point has only ever been a lander-based sort of scout and speeder squadron, although the rogue squadron becomes a lot more significant. Indeed, gets its own film later on. But it was something that was picked up on that was never mentioned again in these films. So he leads his rogue squadron on an attack of the AT-ATs.
The only squadron name that's not based on a colour.
Yep. However, realising their blasters cannot damage the heavy armoured walkers, Luke devises a plan that randomly involves using the harpoons they've got on the back of their ships for no apparent reason.
Why not?
For plot reason, duh.
They use their harpoons and tow cables to bind the legs of the walkers to trip them up and make them more vulnerable. However, Luke's gunner, Dak, who is in it for a whole minute and a half probably, is killed in the first attack, and so Rogue 3, Wedge Antilles, he of the previous Death Star assault, makes the shot.
He wasn't going to be in it. Wedge Antilles was not going to be in this movie, but he'd become such a fan favourite that they wrote him in.
Yeah, and isn't this Dennis Lawson actually doing his own voice as well this time round?
I don't know that one, I'm afraid.
Because in the first film, although Dennis Lawson was playing Wedge Antilles, the voice, he was trying to do an American accent, and I don't think his American accent was good enough. So they dubbed it over. But I think in this one, he'd got enough of a time to learn the accent that he actually was his own voice.
Bless him.
But there's quite a lot of these characters that when you sort of watch it, they're not the voices you're hearing coming out of their mouths. It's been overdubbed by someone else.
Yeah.
So the battle continues. A couple of walkers are destroyed, but the Imperial forces eventually overpower the rebels and destroy the generator. So therefore destroying the energy shield and allowing the other forces to land. Luke's squadron suffers heavy damage, and Luke himself is shot down and crashes into the path of an advancing walker. He managed to free himself and escape the stricken speeder before it is crushed by the large, imposing foot of the big metal walker.
And that became Dak's grave.
And that was squished everywhere. Luke uses a grappling hook to drag himself up to the underside of the walker, where he uses his lightsaber to open a small hatch, lobs a grenade in, and suddenly magically destroys the entire thing.
Lightsaber a hole, throw in a bomb, job's a good un.
Yeah, I mean, if it was that easy, why were they even bothering with the speeder attacks?
In the meantime, the Imperial troops have entered the base.
Imperial troops have indeed entered the
Oh,
base.
heck.
Han Solo, Princess Leia, Chewbacca, and C-3PO flee on board the Millennium Falcon.
Vader is in there. He is in there, and they are legging it, and we just see Vader striding through, and this is really quite scary. Like, they're both in the base at the same time, and it's like Vader is this unstoppable force, and he's gonna get them. Oh my god!
Yeah, although at this point we haven't really seen Vader as an unstoppable force. This is
Yeah, but
this
we've
is the
just
spec
seen him
things.
force choke someone by video link. Come on.
Yeah.
Come on! And then the Falcon won't work, and and Vader's approaching. I thought the dramatic tension in this scene was very well done.
So our heroes flee on board the Millennium Falcon. Luke makes it back to the base and speeds off in his own X-Wing with R2-D2. However, free of the planet, Han quickly discovers that the Falcon's hyperdrive is still malfunctioning and it cannot escape the Imperial blockade. Now, this is the thing that everybody seems to come up with, was the fact that the Millennium Falcon was really unreliable and kept failing. But actually, it's only this film. Every other film, it's been perfectly fine. And I don't know whether it's the impact of Empire that gives it its extra thing, but yeah, it seems to be that everybody seems to think that Millennium Falcon is a bit...
Yeah, I think the number of times that they needed it to do something and it couldn't in this film, it does leave quite a heavy impact.
Yeah, because in none of the other of the original trilogy do we see any issue with it at all. But so yes, it's unable to escape, so they try and fix the hyperdrive, but during the confusion they veer into a nearby asteroid field, which is conveniently located. Pursued by 4 Imperial TIE fighters, Han Solo pilots the Millennium Falcon deeper into the field, and the 4 pursuing fighters are destroyed by floating rocks.
Never tell me the odds.
And the occasional running shoe and potato.
Yes.
In an attempt to find safe harbour and repair the ship, the Falcon is flown by Han inside the crater of one of the larger asteroids.
It's a very, very round hole in
Very
the
round, very
asteroid.
conveniently
A very
sized
long
hole, yes. Meanwhile, Luke and R2-D2 have made it to the swamp planet of Dagobah, or at least a swamp planet in the system of Dagobah.
He managed to just somehow land in the perfect place.
The exact
in
right spot on the exact right planet in the Dagobah system.
Yeah, there has been some conjecture that actually that was Yoda's doing.
Jedi business. Yeah, exactly. He was using sort of like, Force
sat-nav or something. Yeah. So they crash into the swamp. As they're setting up camp, Luke is met by a green wizard little creature, Kermit the Frog.
The ship goes down in the swamp, and then R2 gets spat out by something, and we never see what that something that spits
You don't want to see what that something is.
Yeah, and again, that's one of the changes they make in the re-releases as well, is that they change the dialogue that he says when he comes out. But again, it's one of those changes that you think, why?
And so if it spits R2 out, why doesn't it spit the ship out?
Well, it's not actually eating the ship. I think the ship's just sinking because it's landed in a swamp.
Well, R2 was in the ship, so it would have had to have
R2 had gotten
R2 out. Oh, had he?
R2 had gotten out.
Had he? Because that's not what I have in my notes.
Tooling around on the wing and then fell in.
Okay.
So they've done this. They've dug R2 out of the swamp and start setting up camp. As I said, they are met by a green wizened little creature.
Oh, before that, we see Vader on his ship with his special chamber.
His special. That sounds wrong.
Is that? Do you mean his ensuite loo? That's what. From now on, I am referring to the loo as the sweetheart. I must go visit my special chamber.
His hyperbaric chamber.
You mean his little sort of meditation room thing? Yeah, but it doesn't really forward the plot at all. It just says.
No, but I have a fun fact about it. So then we cut to Vader on the ship. I think that's quite plot worthy as well, in the fact that we glimpse the back of Vader's head without his helmet on. And this is like, at that point, I had not, on first watching, not conceived of a person inside of there, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I suppose that's true.
The frailty of that. So yeah, it's meant to be a hyperbaric chamber, making the air pressure on the inside is greater, which means that he can remove his helmet and breathe normally. And the sounds that they used for the helmet going back onto his head, because they had a lot of interesting things they used for sound effects for this, but I liked this one particularly. The sound effect for the helmet going back onto Vader's head was someone putting their hand over the end of a vacuum hose with it still running.
Yeah, that would fit. I can see what that one is, yep.
And then we see briefly that the ground underneath the Millennium Falcon is unstable, and then we go back to Luke. He's getting stuff out of the ship, but hasn't the ship sunk into the swamp?
No, it's only gone down very slightly. It's got a one wing tip is dipped, and that's about it at this point.
It's not fully submerged.
Okay, I didn't feel that was very clear, because it seemed like the ship had sunk, and then suddenly he's getting stuff out of the ship.
No, the ship sinks later on while he's upside down lifting rocks, because that's what the Force is all about.
Yeah, I just think that the first sinking bit, it kind of showed it sinking, and it wasn't clear that it had only sunk a little bit.
I think it was just settling, yeah. So he setting up camp, and we see our first glimpse of who we eventually find out is Yoda, but at this point just is a small green... well, it's a Muppet, let's be honest here. It's not a furry, but it is a Frank Oz creation of a Muppet.
Jim Henson was originally approached to do Yoda's puppetry, but he was quite busy with a Muppet movie at the time. So Jim Henson recommended Frank Oz for the role, and he delivered us the excellent puppetry and voice work that we iconically know as Yoda now.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that was sold by Mark Hamill as well. I mean, he was... basically, it could have gone one of either ways. It could have become just... almost blatantly obvious that it was a puppet and that it was not believable and take you out of the film entirely, or indeed a terrible CGI of the same creature, which we got in the prequels.
I'm sorry, I'm just a big fan of practical effects whenever you can use them.
Yeah.
And I just think that the puppet looks so much, it feels so much more tactile and present than like a CGI analog is.
In order to have
Maybe that's
the workings for the puppetry, Frank Oz needed to be underneath, so they raised the floor level for Dagobah filming by about 3 feet. So Frank Oz was underneath the floor essentially, which meant that he was performing Yoda's lines underneath there whilst working the puppet up above. So Mark Hamill had to have a little earpiece for Yoda's lines that Frank Oz was saying, because he couldn't hear him directly from the puppet, obviously. And sometimes Irving Kershner would forget when he was giving direction. He'd forget and give the direction to Yoda rather than down below to Frank.
I think that is the mark of a really good puppeteer, is
exactly.
that the people interacting with you, manipulating the puppet, forget that there is a person underneath it.
Exactly.
And I think that's a testament to just how good of, like, a Muppeteer this guy is,
Yeah.
We don't yet know who this green little strange creature is, but he tells Luke that he knows where to find Yoda, and so Luke goes with him to his small house, hut, really, to have a meal.
He's really good at trolling, Luke. He's, like, troll-level expert here.
Yeah. We move back into space and we see the Star Destroyer Avenger move through an asteroid field searching for the Millennium Falcon. Inside their asteroid, in inverted commas, cave, Han Solo and Princess Leia argue whilst repairing the ship, eventually leading to a kiss, which seems to be completely unearned in any way, shape or form. Vader is summoned to contact the Galactic Emperor Palpatine about a new threat to the Empire.
Emperor?
Skywalker.
What do you mean, Emperor? You mean Vader isn't the top dog? Gas.
Well, no, we did know about the Emperor because he was mentioned in Star Wars.
Was he?
Because they were talking about the Galactic Senate, and he said the Emperor had dissolved the Senate, and that the Death Star was now the major force in the universe.
But did we know that Vader answers to him?
Good question, don't know. I mean, he works for the Empire, so I suspect the answer was yes.
He never really gave the aura of working for anyone in the whole time we'd seen him up till now. So this scene is one that was improved in the re-releases that they did, the remastered versions.
I think it's fair to say improving is definitely the case.
They inserted Ian McDiarmid into the Emperor's role here rather than the original. It was Clive Revill who voiced it, and it was actually a hooded woman with superimposed chimpanzee eyes that we physically see. So
what?
The original concept for the Emperor was not human, and it was someone in the production's wife, and then they superimposed chimpanzee eyes over the top of it.
Why?
To make them look non-human, but it really just didn't work.
Well, that's weird because, chimpanzee eyes actually do look fairly human.
Yeah, I don't know if that's how they did it or what. It was really odd. But then when obviously they cast Ian McDiarmid for the Emperor in Return of the Jedi, when they re-released the DVDs and so on, they just put him in instead of this weird concoction with Clive Revill's voice on it.
And they added some lines in that as well, and they got James Earl Jones back to do some of the Vader lines in retort. So that scene was improved in the remastered versions.
So they suggest that Luke should join the dark side, and Vader says he will join us or die.
The son of Skywalker must not become a Jedi.
Yeah. And obviously at this point, we don't know who the father of Skywalker is.
But I do like the way that, Vader obviously thinks of Skywalker as a different person to himself, this past person who he no longer associates himself as being, such that he will speak of Skywalker as being a separate entity.
Yeah, that's weird.
I think very much in the same role as Kylo Ren / Ben Solo as well. So we're back into Yoda's hut, and Luke is quickly growing impatient, wanting to meet Yoda immediately, although Yoda, the creature, this is not yet known to be Yoda, although obviously it's Yoda, is saying that it's also lunchtime for Yoda as well.
All I could think during this scene was seagulls.
I know, right?
So I had for the whole rest of the time on Dagobah then, as a result, was just seagulls running through my head the whole time.
Yep.
Terrible. If you haven't watched Seagulls, I recommend you go onto YouTube and Google it.
Guys, please YouTube seagulls.
Yes.
Just
I'll
anyone
put a
listening
link in the
to
show
this,
notes.
The point in the hut where Mark Hamill bangs his head on the ceiling, Irvin Kershner made him do that 16 times before he felt he'd done it right.
Did he want to give poor young Mark a concussion? That's me.
Well, yeah, I think quite possibly. Bless him.
Yeah, so Luke's getting impatient, and then Yoda or rather the small creature, sighs and begins to talk to the spirit of Obi-Wan Kenobi, making excuses and saying that Luke isn't ready to become a Jedi or to start his Jedi training.
Yoda is totally right about Luke, though. Luke is not well suited to be a Jedi.
No.
So I cannot fault him on his assessment there.
Yep. I agree.
Luke finally twigs that this is actually Yoda he's talking to.
And says, "You've been trolling me the entire time," except he doesn't. He should.
Yoda insists that Luke harbours too much anger like his father Anakin, although Obi-Wan assures Yoda that Luke will learn patience and will complete his training, because he says something like, "Was I any different when you trained me?" Which is odd, because then when you go to the prequels, Obi-Wan wasn't trained by Yoda at all. But
yeah, they
Good
just
old
forgot that when they
prequels.
wrote those.
Luke tells Yoda that he's not afraid, to which Yoda gravely replies, "You will be."
You will be.
That's so.
He says it in this really menacing way, but it just doesn't come across menacing.
Because it's
No,
a
it's
small
just
green puppet.
Yeah.
It's just weird. It's like, why are you trying to be scary?
Yeah.
Back in space, and a group of TIE bombers moving across a massive asteroid field where the Falcon is hiding, releasing high-yield bombs to try and scare the Falcon out. The crew of the Falcon notice that there is something flying around outside, so Han, Leia, and Chewbacca go outside.
How do they do that? They go outside. They were just in an asteroid belt in space. They've not landed on something with an atmosphere. How do they just walk
gravity.
out of the Falcon with no breathing apparatus on? What?
Well, this is what I was saying about physics and geography and Star Wars not making any sense, because
They
yes,
can't
you're right,
act
they're
very well
basically
through
going
breathing
out.
masks, and so they just don't wear them. That's fine.
They do say that there is a lot of moisture in there and the atmosphere is weird, but that's because there's an atmosphere in space, in an asteroid.
Maybe it's a very special.
Yeah, so they
asteroid.
try and clear off the Minox, and then a stray
Leia
shot
has a bad feeling
causes,
about this.
Yep. Stray
Yep.
shot causes an earthquake. Han suddenly realizes that they're actually not in a cave, but
He does
they're
not
in the
confirm
esophagus.
this in a very clever way, though.
No, just says, "Let's get out." He kind of
He
panics, I think,
shoots
more than anything.
It's a giant space worm!
He shoots the thing that they're stood on. Like, if he thinks that this might actually be a creature, don't shoot it in the mouth.
Yes, but if you're not sure, and it is just a rock, then shooting the rock won't make a
Well,
difference.
do that when you're back on the ship, at least. Don't do it when you're still stood outside your ship.
So they shoot the floor. Everything goes a bit shaky cam.
Han Solo, not known for his smarts, though, let's face it.
No, it's very true.
Aw, he's a big
They
dork
get back
and I love
into
him.
the Falcon and take off, and as they're leaving the cave, they notice that it's collapsing, but actually it's not collapsing, it's just a large mouth closing.
Teeth and everything. Ah, nom.
A giant space slug.
Tries to nom
no,
it as they
no,
come
no,
out,
no,
and
no,
it
no.
shoots out.
I mean, it begs the question, what does this thing live
Yeah.
off? Because blatantly, it's not getting a lot of...
It's in hibernation somehow. Maybe it was. Maybe
Yeah.
it was like on a planet in hibernation, and something hit that planet, broke it apart into what is now asteroids in space. And it's still in hibernation through all that.
Because they're still in the Hoth system, which apparently is abandoned, and there's no life there, so... who
No
knows?
life there, but like the Wampas. Yeah.
No. Back on Dagobah, and Luke undergoes Yoda's rigorous training about the metaphysical nature of the Force, involving levitating objects, performing acrobatic feats, and meditating to promote calm and see possible visions of the future, because that won't come back to haunt him later. Yoda, riding on the back of Luke like some strange...
Tiny little backpack person.
brings Luke to an old gnarled tree that sits on top of a cave. Yoda tells his apprentice that the cave is powerful with the dark side of the Force, and that Luke must explore it, but he will not need his weapons. Somewhat distrusting of his master, Luke takes his lightsaber with him, and I know this doesn't necessarily end well, but you can't blame him for that. If someone says to you, "This place is evil, but don't take any weapons," yeah, I think I'd take something
He's
with me
also
as well.
just been told that the Jedi use the Force for knowledge and defense, and never for attack. Well, defense, hello.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not necessarily going to kill everything with my lightsaber, but I've got it with me just in case.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Luke goes inside the cave and encounters some snakes and some other bits and bobs before encountering a vision of Darth Vader himself, who he fights in a very slow and dreamlike sequence.
With a slightly differently coloured lightsaber in the original version, tipping us off that it's not really Vader.
So Luke manages to win the fight, cuts off Vader's head with his own lightsaber,
Chops his
but
head
the
off.
mask
I love it. I love that.
chops his head off, and the head falls on the ground, and the mask bursts open, and it reveals Luke's own face behind it.
Oh my god, no, when I was very small and then I watched this for the first time and he just like decapitates the Darth Vader, that freaked me out so much.
It's like, oh, Vader's in this cave and now he's lopped his head off. Brilliant. Brilliant.
Yeah.
That's
So the mask
terrible. It's
bursts
scary.
open, revealing Luke's own fate, because the cave is another test. One that carries a warning for Luke to control his impulses, or you'll end up like Vader himself.
Just like your father. Oh, I mean Vader.
Just like your dad. Oh, sorry, spoilers. Back on the bridge of the Executioner, and Darth Vader has gathered a small group of intergalactic bounty hunters.
He's got the entire Empire's force in his hand, and he's calling upon some bounty hunters. It's a
Does
bit
he think
weird.
the Empire's force are inept?
No, it is a bit weird, but it just gives you an excuse to bring in other characters.
And he wants them alive.
He wants them alive. No disintegrations. For which the new version gets a different voice for Boba Fett, because they bring in the voice of the clones as opposed to what was originally just a random bloke's voice.
Yep.
I have a fun fact here.
Ooh, Dave,
I have
fun
a fun
fact.
fact. And it might be a fun fact that Daisy's got, but I don't think it is. Bosk, who is one of the bounty hunters, the Trandoshan, who is the lizard-like one, is wearing a costume, a yellow sort of flight suit with white sort of accoutrement that came directly from Doctor Who.
Hey!
Sammy, I know you're more the Doctor Who aficionado than I am. Do you know which episode it was from?
So yes, it was the 10th planet.
Okay.
That was William Hartnell's last serial as the Doctor Who. We like
Yep.
him.
In the Doctor Who, it's just used as a flight suit for a astronaut.
It's just a flight suit that a normal humanoid is wearing.
Makes you wonder how many costumes are just hanging around from way back then, even.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why they use that without doing any kind of modification for it. Perhaps they assumed that because it was an old black and white British TV serial that people wouldn't recognise
That's
it.
pretty much it. I mean, you know, a lot of the...
Well, I'll be fair,
things like
I didn't recognise
the same reason that a lot of older Doctor Who episodes got wiped. And so people weren't rewatching, like, the 10th Planet, for instance, at this stage necessarily. I don't think it was something that was getting repeated much, if at all. And so for a long time, you know, things did just get, you know, costumes and that kind of thing would just get recycled, assuming that most people wouldn't remember, because they didn't anticipate things like DVD releases and us being able to go back and trace, like, wait a second, that little prop in the background of that episode of such and such looks exactly like this Judah from this movie. Ooh, I wonder if they used the same thing.
And obviously black and white as well, so they did pick up the fact that it was bright yellow. Yeah. And... So that was just a side point. Vader promises the bounty hunters a large payout if they can find the Millennium Falcon. In space, once again, the Millennium Falcon is chased by a Star Destroyer.
And the light speed doesn't work.
Yep, and they try and escape, and again the light speed or the hyperdrive fails again. Han manages to evade pursuit, and
This for me is like a classic kind of Han moment where he's like, okay, now I've got this. And he turns the Falcon round and starts flying towards the Star Destroyer. And it's just mind-boggling that he's doing that, you know? He's got guts.
Yep, so he attacks, runs to attack position, flies over the bridge of the Star Destroyer and seemingly disappears. Captain Nida, the unlucky commander of the Star Destroyer,
Oh, poor guy.
Falcon is
Poor
currently
guy.
hiding from, volunteers to go and see Darth Vader to personally apologise for losing the Millennium Falcon. And we don't see much of Captain Nida, but we do hear his name mentioned 3 times in short succession, just to make sure you know who he is.
He says he'll take
He's
full
going to
responsibility
die.
when he says he's off to tell Vader about it. And it's just, oh no, dude. Oh,
We know where that's going.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
poor guy.
Back on Dagobah, and Luke is put through more training, balancing on one hand while lifting rocks. However, as he meditates on the Force, R2 notices that his part-shrunken X-Wing is slipping totally under the surface. Distracted, he loses concentration and the rocks fly everywhere.
It stands to reason. Something
Yeah.
big and urgent is happening. The rocks fall.
Yoda tells Luke to lift the ship out with the power of the
Just
Force.
float it
but the
out,
task-
Luke. Just float it out.
Like, what's the
But the
difference
task
between
is
that and
too
rocks,
great for
really?
Luke.
He sucks, though.
Yoda tells him the Force is all pervasive and that size matters not. But Luke is disheartened and walks away, saying that Yoda wants the impossible. Yoda sighs, and with great effort, he raises the ship out of the swamp and onto the spit of dry land.
I really don't think it should have taken as much effort as it was shown in Yoda.
No, but he is 800 or 900 years old, so...
Yeah.
Luke says he doesn't believe it, which Yoda points out is part of the problem. But to be fair to Luke, he's not actually had any official training. He hasn't really known anything about the Force. He didn't know about it until he met with Obi-Wan, sort of, I don't know how many months ago.
It's something that's been more of a fairy tale to people than it's something that's real.
So to say I didn't know that I could use the Force to lift this huge multi-ton ship out of the water is fair, I think.
It's kind of
I mean, if you
understandable.
know it's possible, then you will do it. If you don't believe it possible because you've never seen it done before and no one's ever said this is possible, then I'm not sure that's particularly unfair.
Yeah.
No.
I think a lot of Yoda's training is a bit crappy, to be
Yoda's
honest.
quite out of practice in training people as well, though. And he's used to training kids over a long period of time.
All of the people he's trained have been within the Jedi Academy and have, you know, the Jedi were a thing and people knew what they could do.
Yeah, this
and
is
it
just a
wasn't-
random farm boy, you know?
Yeah.
Like, give him some credit.
So we head back to space again, and needless to say, Captain Neda's apology to Lord Vader goes as well as can be
Shut up.
expected.
Oh, he is a dead.
But then we see that Han has actually hidden the Falcon on the massive back of the bridge of the Star Destroyer itself.
This is kind of clever.
was-
It is very
Quite
clever.
clever, yes.
I like this whole ruse.
So he is there just sort of hiding, assuming we'd have to assume there are no windows on that bit. Because it would kind of lose its effect if you looked out the window and all you could see was the underside of a ship that wasn't there 5 minutes ago.
So then we hear the plan that normally before going to Lightspeed they will dump out their garbage and so they can float away with the garbage. And so as the audience collectively we're kind of holding our breath that they do what they would usually do and dump the garbage.
Yep, so they say it will float away with the rest of the garbage. For which Leia gives him a bit of a look. So they check the navigational logs, and this is another thing that was like, well, hang on. They didn't use hyperdrive. They were just in the Hoth system, but suddenly now they're in a completely different system.
They need a safe port and they can't go to Lightspeed, and so
No.
Cloud City is somehow within range, yeah.
Because suddenly they're in the NOAD system, which, you know, Han's been to before and knows of Bespin, which is sort of the location of Cloud City, which is where his old smuggling companion Lando Calrissian lives.
Lando!
Who can offer them refuge. But they were in the Hoth system. Their light speed didn't work. Unless they've been sitting on the back of this Star Destroyer while it went to light speed, then I don't understand it. There is
Hand wave, yep.
yeah, it's one of. I mean, there's a very similar incident in The Last Jedi, but I don't think that even that isn't as annoying as
Yep.
this is. But Han's escape plan somehow works, and they do indeed.
They float away with the garbage.
away with the
and
garbage.
I don't know, maybe the Lightspeed thing then does work, and no.
However, as they float away with the garbage, they are followed by another smaller ship, because this is Slave One, piloted by feared bounty hunter Boba Fett.
Who has only 5 lines in the entire film, yet has become a massively iconic character.
Yep. There's probably not many other lines in the other
Yeah.
film either, because he is in
Yeah,
Jedi.
he doesn't
so-
really get much to say ever.
No.
And yet, we love him.
Is a hugely fan favourite.
Go figure.
Back on Dagobah, and Luke is once again sort of hanging around upside down, balancing rocks and lifting things. He's meditating with the Force and has a vision of Han and Leia in danger.
Well,
and agony.
Yoda tells him that with the Force he can see things, and so Luke goes, "Oh, really?" and immediately then gets to see a vision. It's just like, all Luke needs to have happen is be told he can do something, and he can just instantly do it.
He's such a Mary Sue.
Yeah, in many ways,
Yeah.
it really is. Yoda tells Luke this is the future you've seen, and Luke obviously wants to go and rescue them. But Yoda says he has to decide whether to risk everything for his friends or continue his training.
But he's such a Gryffindor that he can't just stay and do his training.
Yeah. We go back to the Falcon and they arrive at Cloud City. Han's party is welcomed by Lando Calrissian.
So now we know, as the audience, that something bad is going to happen in Cloud City to Han and Leia, which adds a completely different viewpoint for us on them now landing than it does for Han and Leia.
Yeah. Han's party is welcomed by Lando, who, after agreeing to help Han repair his ship, takes him on a tour of the city. However, C-3PO is distracted from the group when he sees another protocol droid walk out of a room, and then hears the familiar beep of an R2 unit. Which again is a random thing, because surely there's quite a lot of R2 units floating around the universe.
Yeah, but C-3PO's really missing him, so...
Aww.
Yeah.
Can we just take a moment to appreciate the fabulous cape that Lando is wearing?
Yes,
Yes.
God, Lando's wardrobe is so good. I love him so much.
Yeah,
He's
I
beautiful.
only wish I could wear a cape like Lando, because he wears it magnificently.
I know, he's like totally rocking that look.
C-3PO, though, he enters a small room and is suddenly confronted by an unseen person who asks him why he's in that room, and then gets shot for no apparent reason.
Only Chewie even notices.
Yeah, Chewbacca is suspicious, but arrives on the scene too late to see what's happened, as the door closes before he gets
No one
there.
else even cares.
Luke prepares to leave to save his friends. Yoda and now, conveniently, the ghost of Obi-Wan turn up to warn them of the dangers of rashly leaving, saying that Luke is still susceptible to the power of the dark side. Nevertheless, Luke doesn't care. Departs from Dagobah and promises Yoda he will return to complete his training. Which, technically, he does, but he doesn't actually get any more training, so does this mean he's now a Jedi, or...?
He's the closest thing they have to one.
As Luke leaves, Yoda tells Obi-Wan that matters are now worse, but admits that Luke isn't their only hope, and that there is another.
Dun dun dun!
Who could it be?
I have a fun fact about that scene.
Doesn't it, like, cut straight to Leia at this point?
Yeah, it does. When Luke is like pulling the stuff out of his ship before setting off, one of the things he pulls from the ship is an actual live snake, and they had to do this several times. So several times in various takes, he's pulling this snake from the ship, and Irvin Kershner did tell Mark Hamill that the snake was harmless, but Mark did still get bitten by it in one of those takes, so pretty harsh.
Oh,
He suffered for his art. We get there is another, and then immediately cuts to Leia in a fairly...
I thought that was very well done.
Yeah.
Yeah. Han comes in and reports the ship is being repaired and they can soon leave. Leia says she's worried as no one has seen or heard anything about C-3PO.
Chewie's gone to go and fish pieces of C-3PO out from the rubbish.
See Chewie in a junk pile where he finds the blasted remains of C-3PO.
yep.
And then he, like, threatens the service workers who are just trying to do their job.
Yeah.
Yep.
He's recovering bits of his friend.
So he retrieves all the parts and returns to their apartment and sets about trying to repair
With
the
like
droid.
a box of bits. It's so
Yeah.
sweet.
Because you'd always be missing that last one screw, though.
Oh,
wouldn't you?
yeah.
That's the
Very
problem.
Yeah,
so.
absolutely.
But he's pretty good at improvising the stuff, is Chewie.
Yeah.
Lando joins them and invites them all to dinner. He talks about the economics of the mining industry and how he's just made a deal that will keep the Empire out.
Yeah, he basically,
That was a
as he's
big
walking
red
them
flag.
to the trap, explains to them why he is leading them to a trap.
Yeah. So they open the door of the dining room and there stands Darth Vader, along with Boba Fett, who's tracked them to Cloud City.
No.
Han shoots a couple of shots at Darth Vader, who just deflects them with his
He's
hands.
just
Jerk.
like, whatever.
Yeah.
What a
Well,
jerk.
and says, "We would be delighted if you could join us." As if they had a lot of choice at this point.
It's like, nah, it's cool. I ate earlier. I'm just gonna go.
I believe that's the only time in the whole trilogy where Vader talks directly to Han Solo.
Really?
I believe so.
Quite possibly. Lando insists that he was forced to conspire with the Empire to prevent them from occupying, or more likely destroying, the city. Luke's X-Wing approaches Bespin and vectors towards Cloud City.
Chewie's fixing up C-3PO.
Yeah, we switch back
But
to
he's got
the...
no tools!
well, we switch
How is
back to
he
the
doing
holding
this
cell.
with no tools?
Magic.
Okay.
It just slots back together. It's like, I don't know,
Jigsaw.
a very
It's
basic
we've
Meccano
seen
set or
like
something.
severed wires and things, and yet he just
Yeah.
with no tools, he's just clicking him back together. It's fine.
We then see a torture device that Han Solo is attached to that seems to be just, sparks and heat, and I'm not sure
Sparking thing near his face. It's imagination left for the rest.
But yes, Han is being tortured to lure Luke to the city. She was also being tortured by a loud noise in his holding cell, which I guess if you're a Wookiee, perhaps you got very good hearing.
I suspect he probably does.
As Vader prepares to wait for Luke to be lured to him by his friend's agony, he tells Lando that the rebels must never leave the city. Lando, disgusted with Vader's treatment of Han and his friends, protests that the deal they struck never included that as a condition.
Shocker, the Empire are evil and don't stick to terms of
Any
agreements.
more than handing over Han was to the bounty hunter. However, when Vader threatens to leave a garrison in the city if Lando keeps complaining, Lando is forced to realise how helpless he is. Back in the cells, and Chewie is continuing to reassemble C-3PO when Han is brought in, slumped between two stormtroopers. Leia is brought in as well. There's assumption that Leia is also being tortured, but thankfully we don't get to see that. Shortly afterwards, Lando comes in and tells them that Han is being handed over to the bounty hunter, and that Leia and Chewie will be forever confined to the city. Leia tells Lando that Vader wants them dead, but Lando says Vader is just after someone called Skywalker, and that Han and Leia are bait for the trap. Vader orders the carbon freezing chamber prepared to freeze Luke, which will hold him in suspended animation for the transportation to the Emperor. Lando tells Vader that the facility is only used for freezing food and not humans. So Vader suggests they test the system on Han Solo. As Han is lowered into the machine, Leia declares her love for him, to which he simply replies, "I'm a dick." No, he replies, "I know."
Would you like a fun fact about the I know line? So originally in the script, it was supposed to say something like, "Just remember that, Leia, because I'll be back." But Harrison Ford, unlike Carrie Fisher and Mark Hamill, Harrison had not signed up to a 3-film deal, and he was only returning on a film-by-film basis. At this point, he was undecided as to whether or not he was going to come back for the third film. He'd actually asked George Lucas to kill him off in the story, but they compromised by freezing him in carbonite so that he could either die or come back. Either way would still work. So rather than having this, just remember that, Leia, because I'll be back, then it was Harrison Ford and Irving Kershner who worked out the replacement dialogue.
Yes, which has become the iconic "I love you."
I know.
Which is,
Super arrogant, but very iconic.
So Han is frozen in carbonite, but is still alive in hibernation.
Chocolate. He's frozen in chocolate.
He's handed over to Boba
chocolate.
Fett, who intends to return his quarry to Jabba for the large reward.
He's in perfect hibernation. Yay!
Vader tells Lando to put Chewbacca and Leia onto his ship. Calrissian protests that was not part of the deal, but once again Vader says there is altering the deal. Lando really should learn.
Yeah.
Yeah, this isn't the first time he's had this happening. But he says he is altering the deal and Lando should pray he does not alter it any further. At this point, Lando's got to be knowing that he's going to alter it again, whatever. Meanwhile, Luke lands at Cloud City and is lured towards the carbon freezing chamber. Luke runs into a detachment of stormtroopers, escorting Chewie and Leia back to their cells. Leia shouts that it is a trap before being
But
led
he's
off.
a Gryffindor, so he doesn't care.
Luke enters the freezing chamber, and R2-D2 is not allowed into the freezing chamber because there's a 4-inch high step and he can't get over it.
Oh, baby.
Harsh but fair.
The door closes in R2's face, but also, I suspect, so they didn't have to work out how to get R2 over a non-flat surface, which was always a problem through all of the production.
It's a Luke Vader face-off. Like, oh my god,
It
this
is.
has got to be what people were desperate to see. And they're gonna have a lightsaber duel, but this time it's gonna be Luke. Oh my god.
Yay.
Yep. So Luke faces off against Darth Vader, and as you said, a large lightsaber battle ensues.
So Luke is like super confident because he has these like Jedi powers now, but he's so far only used them against normal people, and is suddenly facing someone who's been doing this for a long time, was properly trained, and is very, very good at it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we've seen Luke Skywalker do any kind of lightsaber stuff other than the fighting Darth Vader in the dreamlike sequence. So, you know.
I have a fun fact about this scene.
Yay!
Mm-hmm.
So, in this scene, it's not David Prowse who is underneath Vader's outfit. It is a chap called Bob Anderson. He was the fight Vader. But because it's quite a physical fight scene, then when he was wearing the Darth Vader helmet, it was very difficult for him to breathe. So for a lot of the filming, he wasn't wearing the helmet. So as you watch the scene, you can see that most of the shots are focused on Luke rather than on Darth Vader, because otherwise we'd see Vader without his helmet.
Yeah,
Fun fact.
While escorting their prisoners, Vader's Imperial troopers are captured by Lando's private security force, who set Lando and the others free. Because Lando is the sort of person who knows which way the land lies.
Yeah, he's not really redeeming himself in terms of...
At this point, it's still
favor.
very, very much out for himself.
Yeah.
Lando, despite nearly being killed by a furious Chewbacca, insists there's still a chance to save Han. Along the way, they're wandering towards the landing pads. They run across a slightly lost and lonesome R2-D2. The group pursues Boba Fett and Han's frozen form through the city, but arrive just as the bounty hunter ship flies away.
Oh no.
Oops.
We'll have to find out what happens there in the next film, because this is very much a middle film.
After a desperate chase from Imperial troops, Leia, Chewbacca, Lando, and the two droids make their escape on the Millennium Falcon. As the Falcon leaves Cloud City, Luke is trapped in the bottom layer of the carbon freezing room. As he heads down a dark hallway, Vader ambushes him, stepping out from the doorway and springing his lightsaber down. And that was the whole... Vader somehow managed to not breathe for that time, because you didn't hear him until he jumped out.
He just turned the
it was very well done,
the speaker off on the breathing apparatus. He does that. He's got like stealth mode, and then menacing mode is with it on.
Yeah. Because honestly, there is something really unnerving about someone breathing super loudly.
Exactly. He knows that, so he has it set to menacing mode.
It's not just that I'm breathing. I'm making a point of making sure you can hear me breathing.
Also, his breathing never changes when he's speaking either.
Creepy.
It just sounds like you've got a cold, Sammy. You're too cute to be creepy.
It's not even him breathing, it's just like a soundtrack thing that he just plays when he wants to be menacing.
Yeah, it's just a little MP3 file he's got on with its SD card in his neck.
Yeah, he's just got a little Zune stuck to a speaker.
Vader and Luke's fierce lightsaber duel brings them to a narrow platform above the city's central airshaft. Darth Vader corners Luke on a catwalk, threatening him, "You are beaten. It is useless to resist." Luke resumes the fight, but Vader suddenly cuts an instrument panel apart. As Luke unwittingly glances at it, Vader slashes off Luke's right hand at the wrist.
Oh no!
Disabling him and sending Luke's lightsaber tumbling into a huge
But
shaft.
now, for someone trying to persuade you to join your team, chopping off their hand doesn't seem like a very good persuasive technique.
I gotta be honest, he's not very good at this. He could have put together a PowerPoint presentation.
I just feel like, a bit more talking and a bit less limb chopping might help with the seducing him to the dark side aspect. Chopping off hand, not very seductive.
No, but it makes him angry, which is what he needs to do.
Oh, because he's already said, Obi-Wan has taught you well, you've learned to control your fear. Now realise your anger. Yes.
Yeah. Luke is cornered and defenceless, because his lightsaber's disappeared into a large shaft, never to be seen again for about 40 years, for it turns up inexplicably in a box.
Well, these things happen.
Well, it lands somewhere, someone finds it. Still gripped by the hand.
With Luke cornered and defenceless, Vader informs Luke that he does not yet know the truth about his father. Luke claims that Darth Vader killed him. This is what Obi-Wan told him. But Vader answers, "No, Obi-Wan killed your father." Which isn't actually what happens, but that's what he said on the film.
David Prowse said during the filming, yes. Yep. Because he was not one of the people let in on the secret. And he didn't know until the film was screened as well. And apparently he was annoyed at not being let in on it because he said his physical acting would have been different if he'd known.
Yeah.
He had to think that Luke's reaction to that line was a bit OTT. That's impossible! Like, no, that's not impossible. That's overreaction here, Luke, maybe?
Yeah, like,
if
chill,
that's...
dude.
Yes, I mean, obviously the real line that is James Earl Jones recorded was, "No, I am your father."
That's impossible!
That makes more sense.
Search your feelings.
Luke screams in denial, and Vader tries to persuade Luke to join him, embrace the dark side of
They
the
can
Force.
rule the galaxy as father and son, and actually, that sounds quite persuasive to me. Finally, he's getting in on this seducting side.
Yeah, but I mean, he literally just cut off his own son's hand.
But it is your destiny! Father and son! He's never had a father! He thought his
Plus the
dad
fact
was
hands
dead.
are fairly replaceable.
His dad's actually here and wanting them to do something together, you know? Have a hobby together,
Yeah, but
fishing,
it's not like taking your kid
ruling
out
the
to,
galaxy.
sort of a diner for breakfast on Saturday mornings, is it? It's ruling the galaxy. That's kind of a big leap from, like, estranged dad who you've never met to let's rule the galaxy together.
That's a big commitment. His dad is stood
steps.
right there,
At least
stretching
take him out to
forward his
breakfast a couple of
hands.
times, get to know each other, you know.
But he's like, he's saying I'm
can't
all
believe
in
you're
on this new
defending Darth
relationship.
Vader.
You know, I'm with Vader on this. I think that's the way to do it. Stop with the hand chopping off. Yes, rule the galaxy as father and son. He really wants this. You can tell that this is like he's really realizing his dream. He didn't know he had a son all this time. He's recently found out during the course of this film, and he's like, oh my god, imagine how incredible this would be if we could rule together as father and son. And I think it's quite emotional.
Needless to say, Luke refuses, letting go and falling off the platform into the abyss below, obviously signifying that he would rather die than join his father.
Leaving the fight as a stalemate. Nobody won.
In free fall, Luke is sucked into one of the city's air vents.
That's a pretty sick move, though, gotta say. You know, I do not want to join your side so hard that I'm just gonna, like, fall off.
And he does it in a way where he looks like he's considering it, but actually he was looking at the drop below going, what am I going to actually drop down into here?
It's so extra. I love it.
Yeah, so somehow, and I've never quite worked out how this happened, Luke is sucked into one of the city's air vents and shoots out of the underbelly of the floating city. Lands on an antenna hanging beneath.
Force or something?
Yeah, force magic.
Luke tries to pull himself back into the exhaust pipe, but with only one hand and no strength left, he's unable to pull himself up, and the hatches close above his head, trapping him on the weather vane forever.
The end.
So he
Except
lets go
no
and
weight.
falls even further and dies. No, wait, hang on.
No, he uses the
no,
force
no,
to
wait.
reach out to he doesn't know he has sister, so that's fine.
First he pleads for Ben Kenobi's help, but the old Jedi Master is obviously off, busy bickering with Yoda. or
And
something.
how can he help because he's actually a ghost?
This is also true. It's like, no, just hold on to my hand. Oh no, hang on, I can't hold on to anything.
You don't
can
even
I?
have that hand.
No.
Aw.
This is also true. Luke then attempts to reach out to Leia using the Force. On the Millennium Falcon, Leia senses Luke's distress through the Force and orders Lando to pilot them back towards the city. Lando protests, but immediately changes his mind when Chewbacca roars at him and goes, oh, okay, I'll do it then. Because there's nothing worse than an angry Wookiee. As they approach the underside of the city, Lando spots Luke hanging from the weather vane and opens the Falcon's upper hatch. Luke falls off the weather vane and Lando pulls him in just as 3 TIE fighters from the Executioner appear and start a rapid pursuit.
Heck.
So at that point where Luke and Leia are reunited, then I was watching that thinking, the last time you saw Leia, that was when you were in the recovery room and she kissed you. And you don't know that since then, her and Han have become a thing. And he might be expecting a bit more there.
Well, true. Although, on the other hand, he's also missing a hand. so
And
perhaps
just
that's
found
what
out
he's
that
doing.
actually his
thinking
father
about
isn't
how much he
dead, his
misses his
father is
hand.
Darth Vader.
They fly towards the Executioner, and Luke senses Vader. On board the Superstar Destroyer, Vader asks Piet to confirm that the Falcon's hyperdrive was deactivated and orders the Falcon be trapped in a tractor beam whilst boarding parties are prepared.
Oh no, it's all going wrong.
It's all going wrong. However, R2-D2, who discovered that the hyperdrive was merely deactivated while searching the city's central computer, reactivates it and the Falcon escapes into hyperspace.
But at the same time, Luke is like trying to talk to Obi-Wan, saying, "Why didn't you tell me, Ben?" Quite
So
right.
A bit of a FaceTime with his dad, a bit of a forced time with his dad, and then has a word with Ben, but Ben's off.
Exactly. Like, this was not the way that he should have found out. There was plenty of opportunity for Obi-Wan to tell him this before being put in this position.
But at this point, Obi-Wan is not accepting his
Especially
calls.
when Yoda and Obi-Wan, Ghost Obi-Wan, was seeing him off from Dagobah. They knew there was a good chance he was going to have a face-off with Vader, and they still, even at that point, didn't say, right, okay, just before you go, there's actually something really important we should tell you.
Kiddo, you might want to sit down for this.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think what we're saying is that the entire Jedi Order is a bit of a
It's kind of a cluster, honestly.
Aboard the flagship, Admiral Piet fears that Vader will now kill him for his failure, but the Sith Lord simply walks away silently. And so he gets another chance to be in the next film. In the final scene, the fugitive and defeated Rebel fleet has assembled in a point beyond the galaxy to decide their next move.
Beyond the galaxy?
Well, they're looking back at the galaxy, so they're on the outer rim, yeah.
Interesting.
On board a medical frigate, Luke is fitted with an artificial hand, as Lando and Chewbacca set out in the Falcon to locate Han Solo.
Conveniently, it's very, very lifelike.
Yeah. Well, you know, apparently losing arms and hands in this universe is very commonplace. Lando and Chewbacca set out on the Falcon to locate Han Solo, with Luke arranging to join them when they signal their success. But Luke and Leia stand and watch as the ship speeds off towards the galaxy. And the title's Iris in.
Body count 67, which is the lowest of the Star Wars films.
67? I kind of expected the body count to be higher than that, but I guess, yeah. Wasn't any major battles, was there, apart from the ground battle?
Just
It
Hoth,
wasn't
really.
that big a deal. Does that include numbers of crew on AT-ATs that blew up and things
Only
like
if
that?
we see them.
Okay. Yes, that was Star Wars Empire Strikes Back. Second of the original trilogy, as I said, possibly seen by many as the best of the trilogy, and possibly the best of all the Star Wars films. Certainly the most favoured of the Star Wars films, but not a perfect film by any stretch.
So I have a bunch more fun facts, if you would indulge me. As I say, there were a lot of different things used for sound effects for things in this film, and only a couple of them I thought were really interesting, and this was one of them. Darth Vader's shuttle door opening is the whole block of Alcatraz cell doors slamming shut. I like things like that. Alec Guinness, it wasn't known whether or not he would actually return as Obi-Wan Kenobi in this, as he just had an eye operation at the time. When he did come in, he worked for one day on Wednesday, September the 5th, 1979. He arrived at 8:30 a.m. and he had finished by 1 p.m. And for that, he got 0.25 percentage point of the film's gross. So that was millions of dollars.
Yeah, that's not bad for a day's work.
For half a day's work, really.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, not even, yeah.
Yeah. The film premiering actually wasn't as big a release as it should have been, because it was first released only on 70mm film. So only really big film theatres had projectors that could run 70mm ones. So it had to be released later on in 35mm film for the rest. I guess once it had proved it was popular enough to warrant the transition. So
Yeah. So yes, that was Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. So we get some final thoughts and wrap this up, because this has been quite a long podcast so far. Joe, final thoughts?
This was not a whole film. This was a middle. It didn't have a beginning, really. It didn't have an end. And I don't see how this is, like, the favourite of Star Wars films. I'm sorry. It just... I don't know. It's not my thing. Sorry.
That's absolutely fine. No one is forcing you to like Star Wars by any stretch. Well, I'm not.
Kidding.
Daisy, final thoughts?
It was very much a middle film, and for me it was the film that turned everything on its head, and I think that's what I love the most about it. It didn't need a Death Star to give us the threat of the Empire. It ended on this like massive twist and this kind of, oh, how can the rebels possibly turn this around feeling, and even the people who they thought they could trust had deceived them and turned against them during the film. And I think for me, from most films that I'd seen before this, had always been like the good fights the bad and things look a bit dicey, and then the good beats the bad. This felt so different, and I really felt the menace of Vader and the Empire from it, and I think that's why I love this one so much.
Sammy, final thoughts?
You'll be shocked and stunned to know that I like this movie. I do think it feels like a second film, sort of in terms of, like, structurally as it sits within the whole thing, but it is the second film out of 3, so that stands to reason, and that's fine. I've yet to read, like, a case for why it's so widely regarded as the best one of all of the Star Wars films ever, but I don't know, I can't pick a favorite Star Wars film, so that's fine. I appreciate all of the wipe transitions, because that's one of my favorite things, and the stop motion, and the Muppets, and Lando and his mustache and his fabulous cape. And
I'll give you the cape.
Yep.
So I can see why this is a popular film. I mean, I'll be honest, it's the darkest of the Star Wars we had up until probably the latest one. There is a lot of failure in this film. A lot of things go wrong. It's not the old story of good fights evil, good finally conquests. It is, basically it goes horribly wrong for all of them. They end up at a position at the end of the film where, everything could be over. They don't quite know what they're going to do now. That I can see why people like it, and it's just that little bit different thematically. I like it, again, possibly because it was the first one I saw in the cinema, because I was a little too young to see Star Wars in the cinema the first time round. I have seen it. I saw it as a double bill with Empire when Empire came out, but yeah, it holds a special place in my heart for that reason. But yeah, no, I just like it, and I always have. So yes, that is Empire Strikes Back. Next time we have 1958's South Pacific, which I haven't watched. I believe
it's a musical.
It's very much a musical. You're gonna love it.
You're gonna wash that man right out of your hair.
So yes, come back next time for the sounds of me trying to enthuse about.
Good luck.
You liked Aladdin?
Yeah, this is true, and I do like some musicals, although mainly Rocky Horror and Nightmare Before Christmas. So
Dr. Horrible?
Musicals. It's all right. But until then, I'd like to thank my fellow podcasters. I'd like to thank Jo.
I've been Jo.
I'd like to thank Daisy.
It's goodbye from her.
And I'd like to thank Sammy.
An absolute pleasure it's been.
And thank you, Dave.
And thank you all for our listeners for putting up with us waffle about films we like, and possibly next time films we didn't like.
We love you. Thanks for listening. You're awesome.
Yes, thank you all for listening.
Please spread the word. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Home Movie Club, part of the That Podcast Thing network. Visit us at www.thatpodcastthing.co.uk, where you can find links to all our social media, including Twitter, Facebook, and our new YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe for news of our future episodes coming soon.